Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Vegeta challenged Darkseid a battle beyond universes? Subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. The wasteland stretched endlessly under a sky painted in shades of burnt orange and fading purple. Dust devils danced across cracked earth, carrying with them the ghosts of battles long past. This place had no name, it didn't need one. It was simply where Vegeta came when the world felt too small, when the weight of being second pressed too heavily on his chest. The Saiyan prince stood alone, his arms crossed, his weighted training armor dusty and battle-worn. Sweat traced lines through the dirt on his face, but his expression remained carved from stone. Around him, the evidence of his training littered the landscape, craters deep enough to swallow houses, shattered rock formations that once stood proud, and scorch marks that still smoked despite hours having passed since their creation. Again, he muttered to himself, dropping into a fighting stance. His aura exploded outward, not the familiar gold of Super Saiyan, nor even the divine blue of Super Saiyan Blue. This was something else, something darker. Purple and black energy crackled around him like lightning born from a storm that had never known light. Ultra Ego. The transformation of destruction, the power of the gods of destruction channeled through pure, unbridled ego. Vegeta launched himself forward, his fist connecting with empty air but carrying enough force to split the atmosphere. The shockwave carved a trench in the earth for miles. He spun, kicked, fired ki blast after ki blast at imaginary opponents, each one stronger than the last, each one faster, each one more brutal. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Kakarot achieves Ultra Instinct, a technique even the gods struggled to master. He growled between strikes, his voice venomous with self-directed frustration. And what do I have? A transformation that makes me stronger when I get hit. I have to take damage to grow powerful. Even my evolution mocks me. He stopped mid-strike, breathing heavily, his purple aura flickering like a candle in the wind. The silence of the wasteland pressed in around him, offering no answers, no comfort. Just the endless sky and the knowledge that somewhere, Goku was probably laughing with his family, content in his strength, never haunted by the need to prove himself. Vegeta powered down, his hair returning to its natural black, his aura dissipating into the dry air. He sat on a boulder, staring at his gloved hands. These hands had served a tyrant. These hands had destroyed planets. These hands had killed innocence before he understood what innocence meant. And these same hands had held his son when he was born. Had trained alongside warriors who became friends, though he never admitted aloud. Had protected a planet that wasn't even his own because somewhere along the way, it had become home. Prince of all Saiyans, he said softly, bitterly. Prince of a dead race. What does that title even mean anymore? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Across the universe, in a realm of pristine white and impossible geometry, Whis paused mid-sip of his tea. The angel's eyes, usually half-closed in perpetual amusement, widened slightly. His staff began to glow, symbols appearing along its length that hadn't manifested in millennia. Oh my, he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine concern that would have alarmed anyone who knew him well enough to recognize it. Beerus, the god of destruction, looked up from his nap on a floating cushion. What is it? Did someone disturb my sleep for nothing again? Because if Goku's picked another fight with someone ridiculous, I'm destroying his house this time. I'm afraid this is rather more serious than Goku's penchant for battle, Lord Beerus. Whis tapped his staff twice, and a holographic display materialized between them. It showed the fabric of space-time itself, usually a stable weave of blue and gold threads. But now, something was wrong. A darkness was spreading through it, not like ink through water, but like rot through wood, consuming, corrupting, fundamentally changing the nature of reality itself. Beerus sat up, his perpetual scowl deepening. What am I looking at? An anomaly, my lord. An energy signature that doesn't belong to our universe. In fact, it doesn't belong to any universe within our multiverse. Whis' finger traced the spreading darkness. It's as if reality itself is being overwritten. And it's approaching Universe 7 at an alarming rate. Overwritten? You mean destroyed? No, my lord. Destruction is your domain, and I know what that looks like. This is something else entirely. This is conversion. Domination. Everything this energy touches doesn't cease to exist, it becomes part of something else. Something vast and terrible and utterly foreign to everything we understand. Beerus stood, his playful demeanor evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Should we inform the Supreme Kai? Already done. I suspect we'll need to inform Earth's warriors as well. Whatever is coming, it's beyond anything they've faced before. Whis paused, his expression thoughtful. And I have a feeling it's not coming for conquest in the traditional sense. This feels personal. As if it's searching for something. Or someone. On Earth, in West City, Bulma Brief stood in her laboratory surrounded by holographic displays that would have looked like magic to anyone born a century earlier. But to the genius scientist, they were simply tools. Ways to understand and quantify the universe's mysteries. And right now, those mysteries were giving her a headache that had nothing to do with the coffee she'd been drinking for the past 6 hours straight. That doesn't make sense, she muttered, adjusting her glasses and pulling her blue hair back into a tighter ponytail. Energy readings spiking globally, but there's no source. It's like the planet itself is reacting to something that isn't here yet. Her computer beeped insistently. Another anomaly. She pulled up the data and felt her blood run cold. Gravitational distortions were appearing in Earth's orbit, small ones, barely noticeable, but they were there. And they were growing. She reached for her phone, then hesitated. Who would she even call? Goku? He'd probably get excited about fighting whatever was causing this. Piccolo? He'd take it seriously, at least. Vegeta? Her expression softened slightly at the thought of her husband. He'd been training obsessively lately, more than usual. Something was eating at him, something he wouldn't talk about. She'd learned years ago that pushing Vegeta to open up was like trying to move a mountain with a feather. Technically possible if you had enough time and the right leverage, but generally not worth the effort. You better not be planning to do anything stupid, she said to the empty lab, knowing full well that if something threatened Earth, Vegeta would do exactly what he always did, charge in headfirst. Pride blazing, consequences be damned. Her computer beeped again. This time, the readings were off the charts. Something was happening. Right now, Goku stood in his GI in the yard behind his modest house, hands cupped at his side, golden aura flickering around him as he powered up to Super Saiyan. He was working on a new technique, or rather, trying to combine two techniques he already knew into something more efficient. Chi-Chi had gone into town with Goten, leaving him free to train without worrying about accidentally destroying something important. Ka-mi, he began, energy gathering in his palms, blue light mixing with the gold of his transformation. But something felt wrong. The energy wouldn't coalesce properly. It kept slipping away, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. He powered down with a frustrated sigh. Man, I thought this would work. Maybe if the sky split open. Not metaphorically. Not gradually. One moment, the afternoon sky was peaceful and blue. The next, a wound appeared in reality itself. A jagged tear that bled darkness and fire and something else. Something that made Goku's Saiyan instincts scream danger in a way they hadn't since he'd faced Zamasu. From the tear, creatures began to pour forth. They looked almost insect-like, with chitinous armor and wings that buzzed with an unnatural sound. Their eyes glowed red, and they moved with a coordinated precision that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. What the? Goku's hand went to his forehead, ready to instant transmission to wherever the attack was strongest. But as he focused his ki sense, he realized with growing horror that these tears were appearing everywhere. Not just over his house. Over cities, oceans, mountains. The entire planet was under assault simultaneously. His phone rang. He fumbled it out of his GI pocket. Hello, Goku? Bulma's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Are you seeing this? Yeah, some kind of aliens, right? Don't worry, No, you don't understand. These aren't just appearing on Earth. I'm picking up similar energy signatures across the solar system. Jupiter's moons are under attack. Mars is being swarmed. Whatever this is, Earth isn't the target. We're just one target among many. Goku's expression hardened. An enemy that could attack multiple planets simultaneously? That took resources and power on a scale he'd rarely encountered. I'm heading to West City. Get everyone together. We need to figure out what we're dealing with. He didn't wait for a response before pressing 2 fingers to his forehead and vanishing in a flicker of energy. Vegeta felt it before he saw it, a wrongness in the air, a pressure that had nothing to do with power levels or ki. It was as if the universe itself had flinched, and that flinch rippled outward, touching everything in its path. He stood from his boulder, eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. There, in the distance, something was tearing through the sky. Not a spaceship. Not a portal created by magic or technology he recognized. This was something else, something that made his Saiyan blood sing with a mixture of anticipation and primal warning. The creatures came first, those insect-like beings pouring through the tears in reality like a swarm of locusts. They spotted him immediately and dive-bombed his position, screeching with voices that sounded like metal scraping against metal. Vegeta's response was immediate and brutal. He powered up to Super Saiyan in an instant, golden aura blazing, and launched himself into the swarm. His fists became blurs of motion, each strike pulverizing 2 or 3 of the creatures. They died easily, too easily. These weren't warriors. They were foot soldiers, meant to overwhelm through numbers rather than skill. "Is this the best you've got?" he shouted, vaporizing a dozen with a ki blast. "Send me something worth my time." As if in response to his challenge, the tear in the sky above him widened. The creatures stopped their assault, pulling back in perfect synchronization. They hovered in a circle around him, no longer attacking, simply waiting. And then he appeared. He stepped through the tear in reality as if stepping through a doorway, and immediately, everything changed. The air grew heavy. The light seemed to dim despite the sun still shining overhead. Even the dust devils stopped their endless dance, as if the wind itself had forgotten how to move. The figure was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with skin the color of stone and eyes that glowed red like burning coals. He wore armor that looked more like it had been carved from his body than fitted to it, dark and imposing and inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. But it was his presence that truly struck Vegeta, an aura of absolute authority, of power so vast and confident that it didn't need to be displayed. This was a being who had never known defeat, never known doubt, never known anything but total, absolute dominion over everything he surveyed. "So," the figure said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying across the wasteland without need for amplification. "This world has warriors after all." "How interesting." Vegeta dropped back into a fighting stance, his pride refusing to show even a hint of the unease creeping up his spine. "Who are you supposed to be? Another tyrant looking to add earth to his collection? Because I've got some bad news for you. We've got a long line of dead tyrants who thought the same thing." The figure's eyes focused on him, and Vegeta felt as if he were being measured, weighed, and categorized in a single glance. "I am Darkseid, Lord of Apocalypse, the God of Tyranny, the inevitable conclusion of all things. And I am not here to collect your world, Saiyan. I am here to correct it, to bring order to chaos, to prove what I have proven across countless realities, that freedom is an illusion, that choice is a disease, and that submission is the only truth. Saiyan?" Vegeta's eyes widened slightly. "You know what I am. I know many things. I know that your race was exterminated. I know that you served a tyrant before claiming the hollow title of prince. I know that you struggle endlessly against the shadow of another, always second, always lesser, always." Darkseid paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his stone features. "Kneeling even when you think you stand." Rage flooded through Vegeta like molten steel through his veins. This creature, this thing, dared to speak of his past? Dared to mention his servitude? Dared to suggest he was still that boy who'd been forced to bow before Frieza? "Big mistake," Vegeta growled, his aura exploding outward as he transformed further, blue energy replacing gold as he ascended to Super Saiyan Blue. "Talking down to me!" He launched himself forward faster than sound, faster than thought, his fist aimed directly at Darkseid's face with enough force behind it to shatter mountains. The punch connected with a sound like thunder, and the shockwave flattened everything for 100 yards in every direction. But Darkseid didn't move. Didn't even flinch. He simply stood there, Vegeta's fist pressed against his cheek, as immovable as the concept of gravity itself. "Impressive," Darkseid said calmly. "For a mortal. But you'll need to do better than that if you wish to make me acknowledge you as anything more than an insect with delusions of grandeur. Vegeta pulled back and unleashed a combination. Left jab, right cross, spinning kick, ki-enhanced elbow strike. Each one delivered with precision and power that could have destroyed lesser beings 1,000 times over. Darkseid blocked or parried each strike with minimal movement, his expression never changing from that maddening calm. "You have spirit," Darkseid observed, catching Vegeta's fist mid-punch and holding it effortlessly. "Pride. Arrogance. A refusal to accept your place in the natural order. These are admirable qualities. In a pet. Less so in something that pretends to be my equal." He squeezed, and Vegeta felt the bones in his hand creak under the pressure. But instead of crying out, instead of showing weakness, the Saiyan Prince smiled through gritted teeth. "You talk too much." Final flash. The beam of energy erupted from Vegeta's free hand at point-blank range, golden blue light consuming everything in its path. The blast was powerful enough to be seen from space, a pillar of destruction that vaporized everything it touched. The wasteland ceased to exist, replaced by a crater of molten glass and superheated air. When the light faded, Vegeta hovered above the destruction, breathing heavily, his hand throbbing from where Darkseid had gripped it. He'd poured everything into that blast, held nothing back. Even Kakarot would have been hard-pressed to walk away from an attack like that unscathed. So when Darkseid rose from the crater, his armor smoking but otherwise undamaged, his expression still carved from bored stone, Vegeta felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine fear. "Is that all?" Darkseid asked. "Disappointing. I had hoped for more from a Saiyan Prince." "Very well. Allow me to show you the difference between us." His eyes glowed brighter, and twin beams of red energy lanced out, the Omega beams. But these weren't like any energy attack Vegeta had encountered before. They didn't travel in straight lines. They curved, twisted, followed him as he dodged, moving with intelligence and purpose. Vegeta poured on speed, blasting away from the beams, but they stayed with him, relentless, inevitable. He tried to deflect them with ki blasts, but they simply curved around his attacks. Tried to create a barrier, but they punched through it like it was paper. "You cannot dodge forever," Darkseid's voice echoed across the wasteland. "The Omega effect is inevitable. It doesn't miss. It doesn't fail. It simply is." Pride wouldn't let Vegeta run. Pride wouldn't let him call for help. Pride demanded he face this attack head-on, that he prove his power was sufficient, that he demonstrate once and for all that he was more than just Kakarot's shadow. So Vegeta stopped running. He spun in midair, powering up to his absolute limit, pushing Super Saiyan Blue past its boundaries, letting his ego and his rage and his desperate need to prove himself fuel his transformation. His aura blazed bright enough to blind, and he roared his defiance at the approaching beams. "I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. And I bow to no one." The Omega beams struck him full force. Pain exploded through every nerve in his body. Not the clean pain of battle, of broken bones and torn muscles. This was something else, something deeper. It felt as if the beams were trying to unmake him, to reach into the core of his being and rewrite what he was. He felt his consciousness fragmenting, felt himself being pulled towards something vast and dark and absolutely merciless. But through the pain, through the agony, through the absolute certainty that he was about to die, one thought remained: "I will not kneel. I will not kneel. I will not kneel." The beams dissipated, and Vegeta fell. He crashed into the molten ground, his body smoking, his armor cracked and burnt, blood seeping from wounds that should have been fatal. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. Darkseid descended slowly, landing a few feet away from where Vegeta lay. "Remarkable. You survived the Omega effect through sheer force of will. That is rare. Across 47 universes I have conquered. Only 3 beings have withstood that attack without being erased from existence. You are the 4th. Vegeta tried to rise, managed to get to his hands and knees, his arms shaking with the effort. Blood dripped from his mouth, pattering onto the scorched earth beneath him. But he was smiling. Through the pain, through the defeat, he was smiling. "Is that all you've got?" he rasped. "Because I'm still standing." "No, Saiyan. You are kneeling." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Vegeta looked down at his position, on his hands and knees, head bowed, before this tyrant. The exact position he'd sworn never to assume again. The exact position he'd been in so many times before Frieza, before he'd found his pride. "No," he whispered. "No, I'm not. I'm just catching my breath." With monumental effort, with every ounce of Saiyan stubbornness and princely pride, Vegeta forced himself to his feet. His legs wobbled. His vision swam. His ki was nearly depleted, but he stood, and he met Darkseid's gaze without flinching. "Better," Darkseid said, and for the first time, there was genuine interest in his voice. "Much better. You have potential, Prince of Science. The potential to become something useful, or the potential to become something broken. The choice, such as it is yours." The tyrant turned, walking back toward the Terran reality from which he'd emerged. His creatures followed, the swarm pulling back in perfect unison. Before he stepped through, Darkseid looked back over his shoulder. "I am being generous today. In 7 days I will return to this world. Gather your strongest warriors. Prepare your mightiest defenses. Train with every moment you have remaining, and then, when I return, you will all kneel. Every single being on this planet will acknowledge Darkseid as their master, their god, their inevitable truth. Those who submit will be given purpose, those who resist." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "And you, Prince of Science? I have special plans for you. You will be my proof. The warrior who never kneels, broken at last. When you submit, when you acknowledge my supremacy, this world will fall in an instant. They will see that even pride, even defiance, even the strongest will, eventually breaks. That is the truth I will teach your universe." The Terran reality sealed behind him, the sky returning to its normal blue, leaving no trace that anything had happened except for the devastated wasteland and one broken Saiyan warrior standing alone in the ruins. Vegeta stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly, his mind replaying the battle. He'd been outclassed. Completely, utterly outclassed. Not by a small margin, not by a gap that training could bridge. Darkseid had toyed with him, and they both knew it. His communicator crackled to life. Bulma's voice, frantic, "Vegeta! Vegeta, answer me! The whole planet's under attack, and Vegeta, where are you? Are you okay?" He reached up with a trembling hand and activated the device. "I'm fine. You don't sound fine. What happened?" "Goku said he felt a massive power spike in your direction, and I said I'm fine." His voice came out harsher than he intended. He forced himself to soften it slightly. "The threat has withdrawn. For now. I'm coming back to West City, Vegeta." He cut the transmission and powered up just enough to lift himself into the air. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body, but he ignored them. Physical pain was nothing. He'd endured worse, had survived the destruction of his entire race, had come back from death itself. But as he flew toward West City, toward his wife and his son and the planet he'd sworn to protect, one thought consumed him above all others. I wasn't strong enough. Not strong enough to make Darkseid take him seriously. Not strong enough to land a meaningful blow. Not strong enough to protect anything. And worst of all, the tyrant had been right about one thing. Vegeta had been on his knees. Had been in that position of submission, even if only for a moment. The shame of it burned hotter than any of his wounds. 7 days, he muttered to himself as West City came into view on the horizon. 7 days to figure out how to beat a god. His hands clenched into fists despite the pain. Or 7 days to die trying. Across the planet, the tears in reality had sealed, the creatures withdrawing as suddenly as they'd appeared. In their wake, they left destruction, cities damaged, people terrified, and a world that had just been introduced to a threat unlike any it had faced before. But in 47 other universes that existed in different dimensions, different realities, different fundamental laws of existence, similar scenes were playing out. Warriors faced Darkseid's heralds. Heroes stood against the coming darkness. And one by one they fell, because Darkseid didn't just conquer through strength. He conquered through certainty, through the inexorable proof that resistance was futile, that submission was inevitable, that free will was nothing but a comforting lie mortals told themselves. He had conquered 47 universes. Universe 7 would be the 48th. And Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, last of a warrior race, a being whose entire existence was defined by pride and refusal to submit, would be his crowning achievement. The ultimate proof that even the most defiant spirit could be broken. At least, that was the plan. But Darkseid, for all his power, for all his cosmic awareness, for all his experience crushing the spirits of countless warriors, had made one critical miscalculation. He'd challenged Vegeta's pride. And Saiyan pride, once truly ignited, burned hotter than any star in any universe. The 7 days began their countdown. The clock was ticking toward an encounter that would shake the foundations of reality itself. Not because of the power that would be displayed, but because of a far more fundamental conflict. Absolute control versus absolute defiance. The god of tyranny versus the prince who would not kneel. And somewhere in that conflict, in that clash of wills disguised as a battle of strength, the fate of not just one universe but potentially all universes would be decided. Vegeta landed on the balcony of Capsule Corporation, his body finally giving out now that he was somewhere safe. He collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting, breathing heavily, blood staining his torn armor. The door burst open. Bulma rushed out, took one look at him, and her expression shifted from relief to fury to concern in the span of a heartbeat. "You stupid, stubborn, idiotic," she started, then cut herself off, kneeling beside him and immediately beginning to assess his injuries. "What happened? Who did this?" "Someone strong," Vegeta said simply. "Stronger than anyone I've faced before. Stronger than Beerus? Maybe. I don't know. But that's not what scares me." He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she'd rarely seen: uncertainty. "He knew how to hurt me, Bulma. Not just physically. He knew exactly what to say, how to undermine me. It was like he could see into my head and pull out every insecurity, every fear, every moment I've ever felt weak." Bulma sat down beside him, taking his bloodied hand in hers despite the mess. "And you're going to fight him again, aren't you?" "In 7 days. I have to." "Why? Why does it always have to be you? Why can't Goku?" "Because this isn't about strength." The words burst out of him with more emotion than he'd intended. "It's not about saving the world or protecting the innocent or any of that hero garbage Kakarot loves. This is about your pride," Bulma finished softly. "My existence," Vegeta corrected. "Everything I am, everything I've built myself into, it all comes down to one principle. I decide who I am. Not my father, not Frieza, not fate, not destiny, not the universe. Me. And this Darkseid, he represents the opposite of that. He wants to prove that choice doesn't exist, that everyone eventually submits, that will can be broken. If I let him win, if I kneel." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I might as well have never escaped from Frieza's shadow in the first place." Bulma was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand. "Then don't kneel. Win or lose, don't kneel. Because you're right, that's who you are. That's the man I fell in love with. Not the strongest warrior, not the great prince, but the stubborn idiot who refuses to let anyone tell him who to be. Despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the uncertainty, Vegeta felt a small smile tug at his lips. I'm an idiot? The biggest. Now come on, let's get you to a healing tank before you bleed all over my balcony. As she helped him to his feet, as they made their way inside where his friends and family and fellow warriors waited, Vegeta made a silent promise to himself. 7 days. He had 7 days to become strong enough to stand against the god. 7 days to find a way to prove that will could triumph over inevitability. 7 days to ensure that when Darkseid returned, he wouldn't find a broken prince ready to kneel. He'd find a warrior ready to show him that some spirits, no matter how much pressure you apply, simply refuse to break. The countdown had begun, and Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, had never been very good at accepting impossible odds. The healing tank's liquid glowed a soft green, bubbles rising steadily past Vegeta's suspended form. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful in a way it rarely was when conscious. Through the reinforced glass, Bulma watched her husband's wounds slowly knit themselves back together, the burns fading, the broken bones mending, the torn muscles regenerating cell by cell. But she knew that the wounds she could see weren't the ones that worried her. How long has he been in there? Trunks asked, coming to stand beside his mother. The young half-Saiyon's face was etched with concern, his arms crossed in an unconscious mirror of his father's typical stance. 6 hours. He'll need at least 12 more for full recovery. Bulma rubbed her eyes, exhaustion creeping in at the edges. She'd been awake for nearly 24 hours straight, first monitoring the global attacks, then analyzing the energy signatures, and now watching over Vegeta. The physical damage was extensive. Whatever hit him wasn't just powerful, it was designed to cause maximum trauma, and he fought it alone. It wasn't a question. Trunks knew his father well enough. Of course he did. Because asking for help would mean admitting he might not be the strongest, and we can't have that, can we? The words came out more bitter than Bulma intended. She sighed. I'm sorry, I'm just tired. And worried. Your father's faced impossible odds before, but this time, there was fear in his eyes, Trunks. Real fear. I've seen him angry, frustrated, determined, but never truly afraid. Before Trunks could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Goku entered the medical bay, still in his orange GI, his expression unusually serious. Behind him came Piccolo, Gohan, Krillin, and Android 18, the Z fighters, gathered in response to a threat none of them fully understood yet. How's Vegeta doing? Goku asked, peering at the healing tank with genuine concern. He'll live, Bulma said curtly. No thanks to whatever monster he decided to fight single-handedly instead of, oh, I don't know, calling for backup. Goku had the decency to look sheepish. Yeah, that does sound like something Vegeta would do. But that's kind of why I'm here. Bulma, the attacks that happened, they weren't random. They were coordinated, precise, and they stopped the moment whatever was leading them decided to stop. That's not how invasions usually work. Goku's right, Piccolo added, his arms crossed, his expression grim. I sensed the entity that appeared near Vegeta. Its power was immense. Godlike. But more than that, it felt ancient, like it had existed since before time had meaning. And it withdrew deliberately. This wasn't a failed invasion. It was a message. What kind of message? Trunks asked. A demonstration, Gohan said quietly. The eldest son of Goku had been analyzing the attack patterns on his laptop, his scholarly instincts working in tandem with his warrior training. Look at this. He turned the screen to show a global map. Red dots marked every location where the tears in reality had appeared. Every major population center was hit simultaneously. Every military base. Every location where strong fighters were known to be. But the casualties were minimal. The creatures that came through, Bulma, what did your analysis show about them? Bulma pulled up her own data on a nearby monitor. They were drones. Biological, yes, but controlled by a single intelligence. Their attack patterns were designed to frighten and overwhelm, not to kill efficiently. If they'd wanted to cause maximum casualties, they could have done far worse. So whoever's behind this wanted to show us they could strike anywhere, anytime, Krillin said, his hand unconsciously moving to his bald head in a nervous gesture. But they pulled back to prove they're choosing not to destroy us. Yet, that's messed up, Android 18 commented flatly. Psychological warfare before the actual war even starts. There's more. Gohan pulled up another file. Whis contacted me an hour ago. He said similar attacks occurred across multiple universes, not just ours. Universe 6, Universe 11, even Universe 2, all at the exact same moment. Whatever is behind this operates on a multiversal scale. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They'd faced universal threats before, Buu, Zamasu, even Jiren during the Tournament of Power, but something that could coordinate attacks across multiple universes simultaneously? That was an entirely different magnitude of threat. So what do we do? Krillin asked. Wait for this thing to come back in 7 days and hope we can stop it? We train, Goku said simply. It's what we always do. We get stronger, faster, better. And when this enemy comes back, no, the word cut through the conversation like a blade. Everyone turned toward the healing tank, where Vegeta's eyes had snapped open, his hand pressed against the glass from the inside, and a moment later, the tank began to drain. Bulma rushed to the control panel. Vegeta, you're not fully healed yet. You need at least. I need to get out of this damn tank, Vegeta growled. The liquid drained completely, and the glass panel hissed open. He stepped out, his body still covered in healing gel, his expression carved from stone. A medical robe materialized around him courtesy of a nearby capsule, but he barely seemed to notice. His eyes were fixed on Goku. You're not fighting Darkseid, Kakarot. Darkseid? Is that its name? Goku's expression brightened slightly with interest. It felt really strong. I was thinking if we work together, maybe use fusion. Did you not hear me? Vegeta's voice dropped to a dangerous level. You're not fighting him. None of you are. This is my battle. Vegeta, be reasonable, Piccolo interjected. You just got out of a healing tank after being nearly killed. Whatever this Darkseid is, he's clearly beyond any single fighter. This isn't about pride. Everything is about pride. The shout echoed off the medical bay walls. Vegeta's aura flared, still weakened but burning with intensity. You don't understand. None of you understand. Darkseid didn't come here for conquest. He came here for me. What are you talking about? Bulma asked, her voice sharp with concern and confusion. Vegeta's aura died down, but his fists remained clenched. He knew what I was. Not just a Saiyan. He knew about my past, about Frieza, about... He trailed off, his jaw tightening. He's not interested in destroying Earth. He's interested in breaking me. He said as much. When I submit, when I kneel before him, the rest of you will fall like dominoes. I'm the proof he needs that free will is an illusion. Then we make sure you don't submit, Gohan said reasonably. If we all fight together, then he'll kill you all in front of me to prove his point. Vegeta's voice cracked slightly. Don't you see? This isn't a battle I can win with help. If I rely on Kakarot, if I hide behind fusion or teamwork, even if we somehow manage to drive him away, I'll have proven his point. That I'm not strong enough alone. That my pride is meaningless. That everything I've built myself into is just smoke. The room fell into uncomfortable silence. No one knew quite what to say. Finally, Goku spoke, his voice unusually gentle. Vegeta, I get it. I do. You've always needed to prove yourself, to show that you're strong enough on your own. But isn't that just another kind of cage? Always having to be alone, always having to prove something? You wouldn't understand, Vegeta said bitterly. You were raised on Earth, Kakarot. You were raised with friends, with people who believed in you, with the freedom to choose your own path. I was raised to be a weapon. Every day of my childhood was spent learning that my only value was my strength, that showing weakness meant death, that trusting anyone was suicide. When Frieza destroyed planet Vegeta, do you know what I felt? Relief. Because at least I'd never have to go back to that hell. He looked down at his hands, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But I brought that hell with me. Into every relationship, every battle, every moment of my life. The voice in my head that says I'm not good enough, that I'll always be second, that one day everyone will see through the act and realize I'm still just that scared boy who had to bow before tyrants to survive. That voice is Frieza. It's my father. It's every Saiyan who ever looked at me and saw a disappointment. And now it's Darkseid too. Bulma moved to him, placing a hand on his arm. Vegeta. I have to fight him alone, Vegeta said, pulling away gently but firmly. Not because I want to. Not because I'm too proud to accept help. But because if I don't, that voice wins. Darkseid wins. And I might as well have stayed on my knees before Frieza. Because what would be the difference? Trunks stepped forward, his young face set with determination. Then let me train with you. Not to fight Darkseid, but to help you prepare. Father, you're always stronger when you have someone to push against. Vegeta looked at his son for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. Fine. But understand this. When Darkseid returns, you stay away. All of you. This is not a request. It's an order from your prince. We're not your subjects, Vegeta, Piccolo pointed out dryly. Then consider it a request from someone who actually gives a damn whether you live or die, even if I'd never admit it out loud in normal circumstances. Vegeta's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I've lost everything once. My planet, my race, my purpose. I won't watch this new life I built burn because I wasn't strong enough to stand alone when it mattered. Goku opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He'd known Vegeta long enough to recognize when his rival's mind was truly set. Instead, he said, "Okay. You get your chance. But Vegeta, if things go south, if you need help, you'd better call for it. Because we'll be watching. And we'll be ready." "How touching," Vegeta said sarcastically, but there was a hint of something else in his voice. Gratitude, perhaps, though he'd sooner eat his own boot than acknowledge it directly. "Now if you're all done having this intervention, I have training to do." 6 days isn't much time. 6 days? Bulma checked her watch. "Vegeta, you've been in the tank for 6 hours. It's still the same day. Hyperbolic time chamber," Vegeta said simply. 6 days out here is 6 years in there. More than enough time. You're going to train for 6 years straight? Gohan asked, concern evident in his voice. "The mental strain alone is nothing compared to what darkseid will do to me if I'm not ready." Vegeta headed for the door, his stride purposeful despite his weakened state. "Trunks, you have 5 minutes to say goodbye to your mother, then we're leaving." He left without another word. The remaining Z-fighters looked at each other, a mixture of concern, respect, and frustration on their faces. "He's going to kill himself training," Krillin said what everyone was thinking. "No," Bulma said quietly. "He's going to become strong enough that death itself wouldn't dare take him. That's what Vegeta does. He turns his pain into power, his fear into fury, his weakness into will. I just hope." She trailed off, staring at the door through which her husband had disappeared. "Hope what?" Goku asked. "I hope that when he comes out of that chamber, he remembers that strength isn't just about how hard you can hit. It's about what you're willing to protect. And who you're willing to be." The hyperbolic time chamber existed outside normal reality. A pocket dimension where time moved differently, where the environment was hostile, where gravity pressed down with crushing force and the temperature swung between blistering heat and freezing cold seemingly at random. For most people, spending even a day in this place would drive them mad. For Vegeta, it felt like home. He stood in the infinite white void, Trunks beside him, both dressed in training gear. The door to the outside world sealed behind them with a finality that would have been oppressive to anyone else, but Vegeta breathed easier here than he had in days. Here, there were no distractions. No responsibilities. No eyes watching and judging. Just him, his son, and 6 years to become something more than he was. "Okay, Dad," Trunks said, dropping into a fighting stance. "Where do we start?" "First, we establish a baseline." Vegeta's aura flared, purple and black as he transformed directly into Ultra Ego. His hair shifted, his eyes darkened, and the pressure of his ki made the already heavy atmosphere feel like being underwater. "Come at me with everything you have. No holding back. I need to understand exactly how much stronger I need to become." Trunks hesitated. "Dad, you just got out of the healing tank? Are you sure?" "Now." The authority in Vegeta's voice was absolute. Trunks transformed into Super Saiyan 2, his golden aura blazing, and launched himself at his father. The two Saiyans clashed in the center of the void, their fists meeting with a shockwave that rippled outward through the pocket dimension. They fought for hours, Trunks attacking with everything he had, Vegeta defending and countering with practiced precision. Ultra Ego grew stronger with each hit Vegeta took, the transformation feeding on damage and converting it to power. But even as his strength grew, Vegeta felt the fundamental problem that had plagued him during his fight with darkseid. He was reactive, not proactive. Ultra Ego required him to take damage to reach its peak power. Against an opponent like darkseid, who could end the fight before Vegeta powered up sufficiently, that was a fatal flaw. "Stop," Vegeta called out, powering down. Both Saiyans were breathing heavily, sweat pouring down their faces despite only a few hours of combat. "This isn't working." "What do you mean?" "Your power was increasing with each exchange. I could barely keep up toward the end." "Exactly. Toward the end." Vegeta clenched his fists in frustration. "Ultra Ego makes me stronger as I fight, but it's too slow. Darkseid won't give me time to build up power. He'll simply end me before I can become a threat. I need something different. Something that doesn't require me to be beaten half to death before reaching my peak." Then maybe Ultra Ego isn't the right transformation? Trunks suggested carefully. What about Super Saiyan Blue? Or even just, no. Vegeta shook his head. Those forms are about control, about divine energy, about perfect ki manipulation. They're powerful, but they're not me. Ultra Ego works because it's built on ego, on pride, on the Saiyan drive to never submit. That's the core I need to keep. I just need to evolve it into something more efficient. So how do you plan to do that? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. By understanding what pride actually means. Not the arrogance, not the posturing, not the need to prove myself better than everyone else. The real thing underneath all that noise. He looked up at Trunks. For the next few months, we're not training our bodies. We're training our minds. No transformations. No ki blasts. Just meditation and philosophy. Trunks blinked in surprise. Philosophy? Dad, we're preparing for a fight, not a debate. Darkseid said something to me during our fight. He said that freedom is an illusion, that choice is a disease, that submission is the only truth. And when he hit me with his Omega beams, I felt it. His will trying to overwrite mine, trying to prove that everything I believe about myself is just smoke and mirrors. Vegeta's expression hardened. I can't beat that with raw power alone. I need to understand, fundamentally and completely, what makes me who I am. What makes my will stronger than his. Only then can I evolve Ultra Ego into something that can stand against him. It was perhaps the most introspective thing Trunks had ever heard his father say. Okay. Then teach me. Let's figure this out together. Vegeta nodded slowly. Sit. We'll start with a question. What does it mean to be a prince? They sat cross-legged across from each other in the infinite white void, and for the first time in his life, Vegeta began to truly examine the title he'd carried since birth. 3 months later, 3 days outside. The meditation had been harder than any physical training Vegeta had ever endured. Sitting still, confronting his own thoughts, facing the memories and fears he'd spent decades burying beneath rage and combat. It was agony of a different sort entirely. But it was necessary. A prince, Vegeta said, his eyes closed, his voice calm despite the turmoil of his thoughts, is not defined by the kingdom he rules. Planet Vegeta is gone. The Saiyan race is nearly extinct. By any objective measure, my title is meaningless. I'm a prince of nothing. Then why keep the title? Trunks asked. He'd grown more comfortable with these philosophical discussions over the months, understanding that this mental training was as crucial as any physical preparation. Because a prince isn't about what you rule. It's about what you refuse to surrender. Vegeta's eyes opened, and there was a clarity in them that hadn't been there before. When my planet was destroyed, Frieza thought he'd broken me. He thought he'd taken everything, my home, my people, my purpose. And he had, in a way. But he couldn't take my title. I held on to Prince because it was the one thing he couldn't strip away. It was my choice to keep it, my decision to define myself, regardless of whether anyone else recognized it. So pride isn't about being better than others? Pride is about being true to yourself, even when the entire universe tells you you're wrong. Even when you have nothing left. Even when keeping your identity costs you everything. Vegeta stood, his movements fluid despite months of stillness. I think I understand now. Ultra Ego draws power from the ego, from the desire to dominate and prove superiority. But that's not pride, that's insecurity masked as confidence. Real pride doesn't need to prove anything. It simply is. He powered up, but this time, something was different. His aura didn't explode outward in the usual violent display. Instead, it settled around him like a cloak, purple and black threaded with gold. The energy was denser, more controlled, radiating absolute certainty rather than chaotic destruction. Royal Absolute, Vegeta named his evolution. Not a transformation that grows stronger through damage, but a state of being where my will is unshakable. Where every action, every movement, every breath is a statement. I am Vegeta. I choose to stand. And nothing in this universe or any other can make me kneel. Trunks stared in awe. His father's power level hadn't increased dramatically. It was roughly the same as Ultra Ego at its peak. But the quality of the energy was completely different. It felt immovable, like trying to push a mountain. Not aggressive, but absolutely unyielding. How does it feel? Trunks asked. Like I finally understand what Kakarot meant by ultra instinct, Vegeta admitted grudgingly. His transformation lets the body move without thought, achieving perfect efficiency. This lets the will exist without doubt. Every action comes from absolute certainty. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just pure, unfiltered intent. That's incredible, Dad. But can it be darkseid? Vegeta's expression sobered. I don't know. This form gives me a foundation, a starting point. But I need more than just an unshakable will. I need the power to back it up. For the next 5 years and 9 months, we're going to push this form to its absolute limit. And then, when we emerge, we'll see if a prince's pride is enough to stand against a god's tyranny. They spent the next months, years from their perspective, testing Royal Absolute's limits. Vegeta discovered that the form had unique properties. Where Ultra Ego converted damage into power, Royal Absolute converted will into defense. The more certain Vegeta was of his purpose, the harder he was to harm. Attacks that should have injured him simply didn't, as if reality itself acknowledged that his will to stand was stronger than the force trying to knock him down. But there was a catch. If his conviction wavered even slightly, if doubt crept in for even a moment, the form's defensive properties weakened proportionally. It required absolute mental discipline, constant focus, unwavering certainty in every action. It's exhausting, Vegeta admitted one day, nearly 4 years into their training. They were taking a rare break, drinking water synthesized by the chamber's limited provisions. Maintaining this level of mental clarity while fighting is harder than any physical technique I've ever learned. Maybe that's the point, Trunks suggested. Darkseid seems to be all about breaking will, right? So you've created a form that literally can't work unless your will is unbreakable. It's the perfect counter, in theory. In practice, we won't know until I face him again. Vegeta stared at his reflection in the water. There's still something missing. Royal Absolute gives me defense and discipline, but Darkseid's raw power is still beyond me. I need one more evolution. Something that combines this unshakable will with actual offensive capability. Like what? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment. I've spent my entire life defined by what I'm not. Not as strong as Kakarot. Not as pure-hearted. Not as naturally gifted. Always chasing, always second, always in someone's shadow. Royal Absolute helped me let go of that. To understand that my strength comes from being myself, not from comparison to others. He stood, his aura flaring around him. But there's one thing I've never let go of. One piece of my past that I've carried like a weight around my neck. The memory of kneeling. Of being forced to submit. Of having my will broken by those stronger than me. Dad, I need to confront it. Directly. Completely. Not run from it, not bury it, not pretend it didn't happen. I need to face every moment I was weak, own it, and transform it into strength. Vegeta's eyes met his son's. I'm going to meditate on my worst memories. Every time I knelt. Every time I submitted. Every time I was too weak to stand. And I'm going to forge those moments into something new. That sounds really painful. It will be. But pain is how science grow. And I've been avoiding this particular pain for too long. 6 years later, 6 days outside, the door to the hyperbolic time chamber opened. Bulma stood waiting, along with Goku and the other Z fighters. 6 days had passed in the outside world, but for the two Saiyans emerging from the chamber, 6 years had gone by. Trunks stepped out first. He'd grown taller, more muscular, his face showing the maturity that came from years of intense training. But more than physical changes, there was a confidence in his bearing that hadn't been there before. Then came Vegeta. He looked different. Not older, exactly. Science aged slowly. But there was a weight to his presence that went beyond power level. His eyes held a depth of understanding that came from years of introspection and self-examination. He moved with absolute purpose, each step deliberate and certain. 6 years, Bulma said softly, approaching her husband. How do you feel? Tired, Vegeta admitted. Focused. And ready. Did you find what you were looking for? Vegeta's hand went to his chest, over his heart. I found that every moment I was weak, every time I knelt, Every second I spent in servitude to tyrants. All of it was necessary. Not because it made me stronger through some nonsense about adversity building character, but because those moments taught me what I refused to become. They showed me the value of standing, even when standing costs everything. He looked at the assembled warriors. Royal Absolute is my answer to darkseid. Not a transformation born from rage or divine energy, but from perfect understanding of self. It won't make me invincible. It won't guarantee victory. But it will guarantee that no matter what he does to me, no matter how much power he brings to bear, I will not kneel. And if that's not enough? Goku asked, his expression serious. Then I'll die standing. And that will have to be enough. Vegeta's expression softened almost imperceptibly. But I don't plan to die. I've got too much to live for now. Bulma pulled him into a hug, not caring that he was covered in 6 years' worth of training sweat. You're such an idiot. A brave, stubborn, impossible idiot. But you're my idiot. Vegeta allowed himself to return the embrace for a moment before gently pulling away. 1 day left. Darkseid returns tomorrow. I should rest, restore my energy. You should spend time with your family, Bulma interrupted firmly. Whatever happens tomorrow, tonight you're not a warrior. You're not a prince. You're a husband and a father. And you're going to act like it. For once, Vegeta didn't argue. Fine. But I'm taking a shower first. I smell like 6 years of Saiyan sweat, and even I have limits. As he headed inside Capsule Corporation, Goku called after him. Vegeta! Good luck tomorrow. I'll be watching. And if you need help, I won't, Vegeta said without turning around. But then he paused, looking back over his shoulder. But thank you for understanding why it has to be this way, Goku grinned. That's what rivals are for. That night, after a shower and a meal that could have fed a small army, Vegeta found himself on the balcony of Capsule Corporation. The city stretched out below him, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Tomorrow, that city might be a battlefield. Tomorrow, everything he built might be put to the test. But tonight, it was peaceful. Can't sleep? Bulma joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cool night air. Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment. In the chamber, during my meditation, I confronted every memory of weakness. Every moment I knelt. And do you know what I realized? What? The worst moment wasn't when Frieza forced me to bow. It wasn't when I served him, knowing I was a slave. The worst moment was when I chose to kneel, and I convinced myself I had no choice, that I had to submit to survive. That's the lie darkseid wants me to believe, that submission is inevitable, that free will is an illusion, that eventually everyone breaks. He turned to look at her. But I've proven that's not true. I chose to break free of Frieza. I chose to stay on Earth. I chose you, chose our family, chose to become more than what I was born to be. Every choice might have been hard, might have cost me, but they were mine. And tomorrow, I'm choosing to stand against darkseid. Not because I have to. Not because I'm the only one who can, but because I'm the only one who can do it the way it needs to be done, as proof that will can triumph over power. Bulma took his hand. And if you lose, then I lose standing. And you'll raise Trunks to understand that some things are worth dying for. That dignity matters. That the right to choose who you are is more important than survival. He squeezed her hand gently. But I don't plan to lose. I've spent 6 years preparing for this moment. I've evolved past Ultra Ego, past the need to prove myself, past the fear of not being good enough. Royal Absolute is my answer to darkseid's tyranny. And tomorrow, he'll learn that Saiyan pride isn't just arrogance. It's the absolute refusal to let anyone else define who you are. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city sleep, unaware of the battle that would soon determine its fate. Finally, Bulma spoke. Promise me something? What? Don't be a hero. Don't sacrifice yourself for some grand gesture. Just win. Come back to me. To Trunks. To this life you've built. That's all I'm asking. Vegeta pulled her close, his voice soft. I promise. Because I've finally learned that standing alone doesn't mean standing without purpose. And my purpose is right here. They stayed like that until dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of pink and gold. Then Vegeta gently extracted himself from Bulma's embrace. It's time. He'll be here soon, I know. Bulma looked at him, memorizing every detail. Kick his ass, Vegeta? He smiled, a real smile, not the smirk or sneer that usually passed for his expression. I intend to. Vegeta flew to the same wasteland where he'd first encountered Darkseid. The sun rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the scarred earth. He landed in the center of the devastation, his boots crunching on broken rock, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Reality tore open as it had before, and Darkseid stepped through. The tyrant looked exactly as he had a week ago, imposing, absolute, radiating the certainty of inevitable victory. So, Darkseid said, his voice carrying across the wasteland. The Saiyan Prince returns. Have you spent your week preparing for your submission? Or do you still harbor delusions of resistance? Vegeta didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, arms crossed, his expression calm. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. I spent my week remembering what it means to be a prince. And I have something to tell you, Darkseid. Something I should have said a week ago, but I didn't understand it well enough then. And what is that? You're wrong. Vegeta's aura began to manifest, purple and black threaded with gold, settling around him like a royal cloak. Free will isn't an illusion. Choice isn't a disease, and submission isn't inevitable. I'm living proof of that. I was born to be a weapon, raised to be a slave, and I chose to be a prince. That choice is my power. That choice is what makes me stronger than any god. Darkseid's eyes glowed red. Bold words. Let us see if your conviction can withstand reality. In 7 days you have grown stronger. But I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am about to learn what happens when you challenge Saiyan pride. Vegeta dropped into a fighting stance, his power fully manifested now, royal absolute blazing around him like a banner. Come then, God of tyranny, let me show you what true pride looks like. Let me teach you that some spirits, no matter how much pressure you apply, simply refuse to break. I will enjoy proving you wrong, Darkseid said. And when you kneel before me, when your will finally shatters, your planet will fall in moments. They will see their strongest warrior broken, and they will understand that resistance is futile. Then you'd better plan on standing there for eternity, Vegeta replied. Because I don't kneel anymore. Not for tyrants. Not for gods. Not for anyone. The two warriors stared at each other across the wasteland, and in that moment, it wasn't just a battle about to begin. It was a fundamental clash of philosophies. Absolute control versus absolute defiance. The tyranny of inevitability versus the freedom of choice. Somewhere behind Vegeta, hidden but watching, the Z-Fighters stood ready. Goku, Piccolo, Gohan, Trunks, and all the rest, prepared to intervene if needed, hoping they wouldn't have to. But this was Vegeta's moment. His battle. His choice. And as the sun continued its climb into the morning sky, as reality itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation, the Prince of all Saiyans and the God of Tyranny prepared to show the universe what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable will. The true battle was about to begin. The air itself seemed to scream as Darkseid raised one hand, reality bending to his will. The wasteland, already scarred from Vegeta's training and their previous encounter, began to dissolve. Not destroyed, but unmade, as if the very concept of earth and sky were being erased and rewritten. Vegeta felt his stomach lurch as the ground beneath his feet stopped being ground and became something else. The transition was nauseating, like being turned inside out while simultaneously falling in every direction at once. When the sensation finally stopped, he found himself standing on a surface that hurt to look at directly. It shifted between solid and liquid, between matter and energy, between existing and not existing. The source wall, Darkseid's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The edge of all reality. The boundary between what is and what can never be. Here, our battle will not damage your precious Earth. Here, there are no distractions, no interference, no escape. Just you, me, and the truth. Vegeta steadied himself, forcing his eyes to adjust to the impossible geometry surrounding them. In the distance, if distance had meaning in this place, He could see massive stone faces, each one depicting a being of unimaginable power, frozen in their final moment of existence. The new gods who had tried to breach the source and been imprisoned for their hubris, trying to intimidate me with cosmic horror? Vegeta's voice carried more confidence than he felt. This place pressed down on him, not physically but existentially, as if questioning whether he had the right to exist here at all. You'll have to try harder than that. Not intimidation, Saiyan. Education. Darkseid descended from above, or rose from below. The perspective was impossible to fix, until he stood perhaps 30 feet from Vegeta. Every being you see imprisoned in this wall believed as you do. They believed in their own power, their own destiny, their own freedom to choose. And they chose to reach for godhood. The source rejected them. Now they are less than nothing, frozen forever at the moment of their greatest pride. And yet you stand here freely, Vegeta observed, his eyes narrowing. Which means either you're not arrogant enough to reach for more power, or you've already reached the peak. Which is it, tyrant? For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across Darkseid's stone features. I have no need to reach for the source. I am the source's opposite. Where it represents infinite possibility, I represent absolute certainty. Where it offers endless potential, I offer inevitable conclusion. I am not imprisoned because I am the jailer. Philosophical nonsense. Vegeta's aura flared, royal absolute settling around him like a second skin. The purple and black energy threaded with gold seemed to stabilize the space around him, giving him a pocket of solid reality to stand in. You talk a lot for someone who claims to represent inevitability. If your victory is so certain, why bother with speeches? Why not just erase me and be done with it? Because erasure is not victory. It is merely deletion. Darkseid's eyes began to glow, that ominous red that Vegeta remembered from their last encounter. I could unmake you with a thought, but that would prove nothing. I need you to understand, Saiyan. I need you to see the truth. Only then, when you kneel with full knowledge of why you must kneel, will your submission have meaning. Then I guess we're both going to be disappointed today. Vegeta dropped into his fighting stance, his power fully manifested now. Because I didn't spend 6 years preparing to understand you, I spent it understanding myself. And what I understand is this: you're just another tyrant with a god complex. I've killed gods before. Gods? Child's play. Beerus, Zamasu, even the Omni King, they are bound by the rules of their reality. I exist outside such limitations. I am the new god, the final evolution of tyranny itself. Defeating me is not about power. It is about accepting that defeat is inevitable. Then let's test that theory. Vegeta launched himself forward. The distance between them vanished in an instant. Vegeta's fist, wrapped in the dense energy of Royal Absolute, crashed toward Darkseid's face with enough force to shatter planets. The blow connected. Vegeta felt the impact, felt his knuckles meet stone like flesh. But Darkseid's head didn't move. Didn't even tilt. Stronger than before, Darkseid observed clinically. Your power has increased significantly. But strength alone will never be sufficient. He moved. Not quickly. There was no speed involved. One moment Darkseid stood receiving Vegeta's punch. The next, his fist was buried in Vegeta's stomach. Pain exploded through Vegeta's body, but Royal Absolute held. His will crystallized around the impact, his absolute certainty that he would not fall converting into resistance. Instead of folding around Darkseid's fist, instead of being launched backward, Vegeta's body absorbed the impact. His feet skidded back perhaps an inch, carving lines in the non-surface beneath them. Interesting, Darkseid said. You've learned to convert will into defense. Admirable. Vegeta coughed blood but didn't retreat. Admire this. He unleashed a barrage of strikes, punches, kicks, knee strikes, elbow slams, each one delivered with perfect technique, each one carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Royal Absolute made every blow certain, made each strike an expression of undeniable will rather than mere physical force. Darkseid blocked, parried, and deflected with minimal movement. His defense was perfect, economical, and seemingly effortless. But Vegeta noticed something. Darkseid was actually defending now. During their first encounter, the tyrant had simply tanked Vegeta's attacks as if they were nothing. Now he was acknowledging them as threats, even minor ones. Progress, Vegeta thought grimly. Small, but it's something. Their exchange accelerated. Fists and feet blurred as the two warriors tested each other, probing for weaknesses, searching for openings. The space around them cracked and reformed with each impact, reality itself struggling to contain the clash of absolute will versus absolute power. Vegeta spun low, sweeping Darkseid's legs. The tyrant actually lifted off the ground to avoid it, another acknowledgement that Vegeta's attacks mattered. Pressing his advantage, Vegeta fired a ki blast point-blank into Darkseid's chest. The explosion would have vaporized the city. Here at the source wall, it merely created a sphere of white-hot energy that consumed both fighters. When it cleared, Darkseid stood unmarked, but there was something in his expression now. Calculation. Assessment. You've evolved past simple transformation, Darkseid said. This is not power gained through rage or divine blessing. This is what made manifest. How novel, I told you. 6 years of understanding what pride actually means. Vegeta wiped blood from his mouth. His stomach ached where Darkseid had struck him, but Royal Absolute had prevented serious damage. You see me as just another warrior to break. But I'm not fighting with power I borrowed or stole or was given. This is me. Just me. And that makes all the difference. Does it? Darkseid's Omega beams lanced out without warning. Vegeta reacted instantly, dodging left. The beams curved, following him. He pushed his speed to the limit, weaving between the deadly energy. But the beams stayed locked on him like heat-seeking missiles. Same problem as before, Vegeta thought, his mind racing. Can't dodge them forever. Can't deflect them. Can't wait. During his meditation in the hyperbolic time chamber, he'd realized something about the Omega beams. They weren't just energy attacks. They were expressions of Darkseid's will, his absolute certainty that Vegeta would be hit, would be erased, would cease to resist. They tracked because Darkseid's will was imposed on reality itself, and reality bent to accommodate that will. But Royal Absolute was also what made manifest. Vegeta's absolute certainty that he would stand, would endure, would not submit. If his will says I'll be hit, and my will says I won't, then this becomes a contest of conviction, not speed. Vegeta stopped dodging. He turned to face the Omega beams head-on, planted his feet, and let Royal Absolute blaze at its maximum intensity. His aura solidified into something almost physical, a barrier of pure determination. I will not fall. The Omega beams struck his aura and stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply stopped, as if they'd hit a wall they couldn't comprehend. Energy crackled where Darkseid's will met Vegeta's, reality straining under the contradiction. For 3 seconds, Vegeta held them. His body shook with the effort, sweat pouring down his face, every muscle screaming. But he held. Then the beams dispersed, unable to maintain their cohesion against such absolute rejection. Darkseid's eyes widened fractionally. Impossible. No one has ever negated the Omega effect through sheer will alone. Then I guess I'm the first. Vegeta was breathing hard, the effort of that defense having drained significant energy. But the look on Darkseid's face, that tiny crack in his absolute certainty, made it worth every ounce of power spent. What's wrong, God of Tyranny? Starting to doubt your own inevitability? Doubt? Darkseid's expression hardened back into stone. No. But I will admit you've earned the right to see my true power. This, he gestured dismissively at his current state, is merely an avatar, a projection. You've been fighting a shadow, Saiyan. The tyrant's form began to expand, grow, solidify. The red in his eyes burned brighter. The symbols on his armor began to glow with eldritch light. The pressure of his presence increased exponentially, until even Royal Absolute struggled to maintain its protective envelope around Vegeta. This is Darkseid. Unfiltered. Undiluted. The full weight of absolute tyranny given form. The voice now came from everywhere, shaking the source wall itself. Some of the frozen faces in the distance cracked, unable to withstand the resonance of Darkseid's true presence. Vegeta felt his knees buckle. Not from physical force, but from the sheer existential weight of what he was facing. This wasn't just a powerful being. This was a concept made flesh, an idea that had achieved consciousness and form. Darkseid wasn't just strong, he was the embodiment of dominance itself. No, Vegeta thought, forcing his legs to lock, forcing himself to remain standing. That's what he wants me to think. That's his weapon, making you believe he's more than he is. But he's not a concept. He's flesh and blood and ego, just like anyone else. Just like me. Impressive willpower, Darkseid acknowledged. Most beings cannot even remain conscious in my true presence, let alone stand. But willpower alone will not save you. Let me show you the difference between us. He moved, and this time there was speed involved, speed beyond anything Vegeta had encountered. One moment Darkseid stood 30 feet away. The next, his fist was cratering Vegeta's face. Royal Absolute's defense activated automatically. Vegeta's were crystallizing to absorb the impact. But the force was so immense that even with the protection, Vegeta felt his jaw crack. He was launched backward, tumbling through the impossible geometry of the source wall's edge until he crashed into one of the frozen god faces. The impact should have killed him. Would have, if not for Royal Absolute's protection. As it was, he merely felt like he'd been hit by a moon. That was one strike, Darkseid said, appearing above Vegeta without seeming to cross the distance between. At 20% of my true strength. Shall I continue the demonstration? Vegeta spat blood and forced himself to his feet. His jaw was already healing. Saiyan biology combined with Royal Absolute's stabilizing effect on his body. 20%? You really are worried about me if you're holding back. Not worry. Consideration. If I struck you with full force, this battle would end immediately, and you would learn nothing. I am being educational. How generous. Vegeta wiped blood from his mouth and grinned through broken teeth. But here's something for you to learn, tyrant. Science grows stronger through battle. Every hit you land, every moment I survive, I'm adapting. Evolving. Becoming more than I was. Yes, I've observed your race's peculiar trait. But there are limits to adaptation, Saiyan. And I am beyond those limits. Then prove it. Stop talking and fight me with everything you have. Darkseid tilted his head, considering. Very well. If death is what you seek, I shall provide it. But know this, I gave you the opportunity to learn. What happens now is your choice. The tyrant's aura exploded outward, dark energy that made Vegeta's Royal Absolute look like a candle before a star. The source wall itself recoiled, the frozen gods' faces turning away as if even in their imprisonment they could feel the terror of Darkseid unleashed. Vegeta braced himself, pouring every ounce of will into Royal Absolute, pushing the form beyond anything he'd achieved in training. His aura blazed bright enough to create its own light in the darkness Darkseid emanated. They clashed. The impact resonated across dimensions. In Universe 7, every being sensitive to Ki felt it. A pressure wave of pure conflict that made even Beerus sit up and take notice. At Capsule Corporation, Bulma's instruments exploded, unable to measure the energies being thrown around at the source wall. Vegeta and Darkseid became blurs of motion, their strikes coming so fast that they seemed to occupy multiple positions simultaneously. Each of Vegeta's attacks carried the weight of absolute determination. Each of Darkseid's blows carried the force of inevitable conclusion. For every strike Vegeta landed, Darkseid landed 3. But Vegeta's hits made Darkseid acknowledge him, made the tyrant block, dodge, take him seriously. And that was a victory in itself. You're strong, Darkseid admitted between exchanges, catching Vegeta's fist and twisting, forcing the Saiyan to flip away to avoid having his arm broken. Stronger than 47 universes worth of warriors. But strength is not enough. You lack the fundamental understanding of what I represent. Then enlighten me, Vegeta growled, firing a Gallic gun point blank. The purple beam consumed Darkseid, but when it cleared, the tyrant stood unharmed. I am the anti-life equation made manifest, Darkseid said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. The mathematical proof that free will is an illusion, that every choice you think you make was predetermined. That your struggle, your pride, your defiance, all of it is merely part of the equation leading to inevitable submission. That's garbage. Vegeta launched himself forward again, refusing to let Darkseid's words sink in. If choice didn't matter, I'd still be serving Frieza. If free will was an illusion, I'd never have changed, never grown, never become who I am. But don't you see? Darkseid caught Vegeta's punch, then his kick, holding the Saiyan immobile in midair. Every choice you think you made was simply the result of factors beyond your control. Your rebellion against Frieza? Caused by Saiyan pride coded into your genetics. Your protection of Earth? Environmental conditioning from years of living there. Your love for your family? Chemical reactions in your brain creating the illusion of emotion. You are a biological machine following its programming, nothing more. No! Vegeta roared, his aura exploding outward with enough force to break Darkseid's grip. He flipped backward, gathering energy in both hands. I am more than genetics. More than conditioning, more than chemical reactions. I am my choices. I am my will. I am Vegeta. He unleashed everything he had. Not just a final flash, but something more. Every technique he knew combined with royal absolute certainty, creating a beam of energy that was as much will as power. Gold, purple, and black light spiraled together, forming a lance of pure determination. Final absolute flash. The beam consumed everything in its path. The source wall cracked. Reality screamed. For a moment, just a moment, even Darkseid's certainty wavered before the sheer force of Vegeta's rejection of inevitability. When the light finally faded, Vegeta hovered in place, breathing hard, his power nearly depleted. He'd put everything into that attack, not just energy, but his very essence, his complete refusal to accept Darkseid's philosophy. The smoke cleared. Darkseid stood, his armor cracked, a thin line of something that might have been blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. For the first time, he looked, if not injured then at least affected. Remarkable, the tyrant said, touching the blood and examining it with what might have been surprise. You've actually wounded me. Not my avatar. Not a projection. You've managed to harm the true Darkseid. That is, unprecedented. Vegeta wanted to press his advantage, but his body wouldn't respond. He'd used too much power, pushed too far. Royal Absolute flickered around him, his will still strong but his body unable to support it any longer. But it changes nothing, Darkseid continued, the cracks in his armor already healing. You've proven yourself stronger than expected. You've demonstrated will beyond what I thought possible for a mortal. And yet here we stand, you depleted, me merely inconvenienced. The gap between us remains insurmountable. Then, finish it, Vegeta gasped, his vision blurring. If you're so certain you've won, end this. Darkseid studied him for a long moment. Then, to Vegeta's surprise, he shook his head. No. Not yet. You've earned something rare, Saiyan. My genuine interest. I want to see how far you can evolve. I want to watch you struggle and strive and push past every limit, only to ultimately realize that none of it matters. That the equation always balances. That submission is inevitable. The tyrant began to walk away, back toward the Terran reality that would return them to Universe 7. You have wounded me, Prince of Science. A feat worthy of respect. So I will give you a gift, time to grow stronger. To evolve further. To perhaps even believe you might have a chance. He paused at the threshold. But understand this. Every moment I give you to grow stronger, I do so knowing that your eventual submission will be all the more meaningful. When you finally kneel, when you finally accept the truth of the anti-life equation, it will not be because you were too weak to resist. It will be because you chose submission with full knowledge of what you were giving up. And that choice will break not just you, but everyone who looked to you as a symbol of defiance. I'll never kneel, Vegeta whispered, his consciousness fading. Never again. We shall see, Saiyan. We shall see. Vegeta woke in a healing tank for the second time in a week. Through the green liquid and reinforced glass, he could see Bulma's worried face, Trunks standing beside her, and further back, the assembled Z-fighters. He wanted to punch something. He'd been so close. Had actually wounded Darkseid, had forced the tyrant to acknowledge him as a genuine threat. And yet, it hadn't been enough. Not nearly enough. The gap between them was still vast. Darkseid had been holding back, testing him, playing with him. Even Royal Absolute, even 6 years of training and evolution, even his absolute refusal to submit. None of it had bridged that fundamental difference in power. But I wounded him, Vegeta thought. clinging to that fact like a lifeline. I made a god bleed. That's more than most beings can claim. It's a start. The healing tank began to drain. His wounds were mending, his body recovering from the punishment it had endured. But there was another wound, deeper and harder to heal, the wound to his pride, knowing that even his best hadn't been enough. The glass opened. Bulma immediately stepped forward, but before she could say anything, Vegeta spoke. How long? 12 hours, she said quietly. Vegeta, what happened out there? The energy readings we got. It was like reality itself was tearing apart. I fought him. Truly fought him, with everything I had. Vegeta stepped out of the tank, accepting a towel and wrapping it around himself. And I lost. But you're alive, Trunks said, relief evident in his voice. That's something, right? He let me live. The words tasted like ash in Vegeta's mouth. Not because he couldn't kill me. Because he wants to break me properly. He wants me to grow stronger, to give everything I have, only to prove that it's still not enough. That submission is inevitable. Goku stepped forward, his expression serious. Vegeta, we need to talk strategy. If this dark side is as strong as you're saying, no strategy will help, Vegeta interrupted. This isn't about tactics or teamwork. It's about philosophy. About will. He embodies the anti-life equation, the proof that free will doesn't exist. I embody the rejection of that proof. This is a battle that only I can fight because only I can represent what needs to be represented. And what's that? Piccolo asked. Choice. Vegeta looked at each of them in turn. The ability to define yourself regardless of circumstances, genetics, or fate. I'm not fighting for Earth. I'm not fighting for you. I'm fighting to prove that we're all more than the sum of our programming. That the choices we make matter. That will can triumph over inevitability. That's very philosophical, Krillin said nervously. But how do you actually beat him? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. Royal Absolute gave me defense, gave me the ability to stand against his power. But I need more. I need offense that matches my defense. I need to evolve again. How much time do we have? Gohan asked. He didn't say. But based on his pattern, probably another 7 days. He seems to like that number, giving just enough time to prepare, to hope, before crushing that hope. Vegeta clenched his fists. But this time will be different. I wounded him. Made him bleed. That means he's not invincible. That means there's a way to beat him. I just need to find it. Then we'll help you find it, Goku said. Vegeta, I know you want to do this alone, but no. Vegeta's voice was firm but not angry. I appreciate the offer, Kakarot. Truly. But this is my path to walk. You've had Ultra Instinct, the ability to let your body move without thought, achieving perfect efficiency. I need to find the offensive equivalent of that for Royal Absolute. A way to let my will strike without hesitation, without doubt, with perfect certainty. He looked at his hands, still trembling slightly from exhaustion and residual pain. I wounded a god today. Next time, I'm going to make him understand what it means to face someone who refuses to kneel, someone who represents everything he's tried to disprove. And if you can't find this evolution in time? Bulma asked quietly. Vegeta met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch, not fear, but determination so absolute it bordered on madness. Then I'll fight him anyway. And I'll lose standing, because that's who I am. That's who I've chosen to be. And no equation, no matter how complete, can take that away from me. The room fell silent. Finally, Trunks spoke up. What can I do to help, Dad? Train with me again. Not to make me stronger, but to push me further. I need to break through Royal Absolute's limitations. Right now, it's perfect defense but limited offense. I need both. He trailed off, his mind working. I need to stop thinking of pride as just defense. Pride isn't just refusing to fall. It's also refusing to stop attacking. It's the certainty that every blow I land matters, that every strike carries the weight of my absolute determination. Like Ultra Instinct, but for offense? Goku mused, actually looking interested despite his earlier concerns. That's actually pretty cool, Vegeta. If you can attack with the same certainty you defend, then Darkseid's philosophy becomes irrelevant. His anti-life equation can't account for someone who refuses to accept its premise. Vegeta straightened up, energy returning to his exhausted body through sheer force of will. Trunks, we're going back to the hyperbolic time chamber. Vegeta, you just got out of the healing tank. Bulma protested. You need rest, actual rest, not more training. I'll rest when Darkseid is defeated. Every moment I waste is a moment he uses to plan my humiliation. He saw the worry in her eyes and softened slightly. I'll be careful, and this time, it won't take 6 years. I know what I need to find now. It's just a matter of reaching it. Bulma looked like she wanted to argue further, but she knew that expression. Vegeta had made up his mind, and trying to stop him would be like trying to stop the tide. Fine. But Vegeta, when you come out of that chamber, when you face Darkseid again, you'd better win. Because I'm not raising Trunks alone, understood? Understood. He allowed himself a small smile. Besides, I've got too much to live for now to let some tyrant with a god complex take it away. He wants to prove that choice doesn't matter? I'm going to prove that one choice, one absolute, unwavering choice to stand, can overcome any power. As father and son headed toward the hyperbolic time chamber, the other Z-fighters exchanged glances. They'd seen Vegeta determined before, seen him obsessed with surpassing Goku, seen him driven by pride and anger and the need to prove himself. But this was different. This was Vegeta fighting not to be the strongest, but to be himself. Fighting to prove that identity mattered, that will mattered, that the choices that defined him were real and meaningful. It was perhaps the purest battle the Saiyan Prince had ever faced. Not for glory or revenge or even survival, but for the right to exist as himself, undefined by anyone else's equation or philosophy. And as the door to the hyperbolic time chamber sealed behind them, as reality bent once more to give the warriors time to evolve, one thought echoed through Vegeta's mind: I wounded him. That means he can bleed. And if he can bleed, he can lose. I just need to find the will to make him. The countdown to the next confrontation had begun. And this time, Vegeta was determined to do more than just survive. This time, he was going to show Darkseid what true pride looked like. This time, he was going to prove that some spirits, no matter how much you try to break them, only become stronger at the broken places. This time, the Prince of all Saiyans would stand not just in defiance, but in absolute, unshakable certainty that his will was stronger than any equation, and that would make all the difference. Meanwhile, in the depths of space beyond Universe 7, Darkseid stood in his throne room on Apocalypse, looking at his hand where Vegeta's attack had wounded him. The injury had healed completely within moments, but the fact that it had existed at all was interesting. Desaad, he called out, and his torturous scientists scurried forward, bowing low. Yes, Lord Darkseid, the Saiyan Prince. Analysis. His power increased by approximately 400% from your first encounter. His technique has evolved into something unique, a transformation that converts willpower into defensive capability. It's crude compared to your mastery of the anti-life equation, but effective in its own way. He wounded me. Desaad's eyes widened in shock. The true you, Lord? Not merely an avatar? The true me. A scratch, nothing more, but unprecedented nonetheless. Darkseid's eyes glowed red in contemplation. In 47 universes, across countless battles, only 3 beings have ever managed such a feat. This Saiyan is the 4th. And unlike the others, he grows stronger not through rage or desperation, but through understanding. Through choice. Shall I prepare the full invasion force? We could crush Universe 7 before he evolves further. No. Darkseid's voice was firm. I want him to evolve. I want him to reach his absolute peak, to achieve everything he's capable of achieving. Because when he finally kneels, and he will kneel, it will not be because he was too weak. It will be because even at his strongest, even with perfect will, even with the absolute certainty that choice matters, the anti-life equation will prove him wrong. A gamble, Lord? Not a gamble. An inevitability. Darkseid sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. The Saiyan Prince believes he represents free will. He believes his choices define him. But every choice he makes, every action he takes, every evolution he achieves, all of it leads to one conclusion. Submission. And when he realizes this, when he sees that even his greatest triumph was merely another step toward my victory, his spirit will break completely. And if he proves you wrong? Darkseid asked, then immediately regretted the question. But Darkseid only smiled, a terrible expression on his stone features. Then I will have discovered something even the source doesn't know. And that would be worth the inconvenience. Either way, I win. That is the beauty of inevitability. He stood, walking to the massive window overlooking Apocalypse, where his armies drilled in perfect unison, where beings from conquered worlds worked in absolute synchronization, where free will had been replaced with purpose. Let the Saiyan have his time. Let him believe he can win. Because the higher he rises, the more spectacular his fall will be, and Universe 7 will learn, as 47 universes before them learned, that Darkseid is inevitable. The countdown continued. 2 warriors, 2 philosophies, on a collision course that would determine more than just the fate of one universe. It would determine whether will or power held ultimate authority, whether pride was strength or delusion, whether one Saiyan prince could stand against the embodiment of tyranny itself. The answer was coming, and blood, first blood, had already been drawn. The green liquid of the healing tank drained away for what felt like the 100th time, leaving Vegeta standing in the chamber, fully healed but utterly exhausted in ways that went beyond the physical. His reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass, the same face, the same body, but something in his eyes had changed. There was a hardness there now, a weight that came from understanding just how vast the gap between him and Darkseid truly was. The glass panel slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Vegeta stepped out, water dripping from his hair, and immediately reached for a towel. The medical bay was quieter this time, just Bulma, sitting in a chair nearby, her laptop forgotten on her lap, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. How long? Vegeta asked, his voice hoarse. 18 hours. Bulma closed her laptop and stood, approaching him slowly, as if afraid he might shatter. You've been in and out of that tank 3 times in 2 days, Vegeta. Your body is healed, but my pride is wounded, he finished for her, wrapping the towel around his waist. I know. Believe me, I know. She reached out and touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. Talk to me. Please. You've been pushing everyone away since you came back from the source wall. Even Trunks is worried. Vegeta closed his eyes, leaning into her touch for just a moment before pulling away. What do you want me to say, woman? That I'm scared? That I faced something beyond anything I've ever encountered and barely managed to scratch it? That everything I've built, everything I've become, might not be enough? Yes, Bulma said simply. I want you to say that. I want you to be honest with me instead of carrying this all alone. I can't. Vegeta moved past her, heading toward the window that overlooked West City. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. If I admit weakness, if I acknowledge doubt, then Darkseid has already won. His entire philosophy is built on the idea that will can be broken, that everyone eventually submits. I have to be absolutely certain, without a single crack in my conviction, or royal absolute fails. And if that fails, I have nothing. Bulma came to stand beside him. That's not true. You have us. Your family. Your friends. People who will die if I fail. Vegeta's voice was flat, emotionless, but Bulma could hear the fear underneath. He made that clear. He's not interested in conquering Earth through force. He wants to break me, and when I kneel, when I submit, he'll use that as proof to everyone else that resistance is futile. That's his weapon, not power, but psychological warfare. He wants me to watch everyone I care about lose hope because their strongest defender fell. Then don't fall. Vegeta let out a bitter laugh. Just like that? Don't fall? Woman, you didn't see him. You didn't feel the weight of his presence. Beerus is powerful, but Beerus is still bound by the rules of this universe. Darkseid, he's something else. He's the embodiment of tyranny itself, given form and consciousness. Fighting him isn't like fighting an enemy. It's like fighting gravity, or time, or death. How do you punch inevitability? The same way you've always done it, Bulma said, her voice firm. By being too stubborn to know when you're beaten. By refusing to accept what everyone else says is impossible. Vegeta, I've watched you transform yourself from a genocidal warrior into a man capable of love and sacrifice. I've seen you break through limits that God said couldn't be broken. If anyone can find a way to defeat this dark side, it's you. And if I can't? The question hung in the air between them. Finally, Bulma answered. Then you go down fighting. And you make damn sure he remembers the name Vegeta for the rest of his eternal existence. But I don't think it'll come to that. You know why? Why? Because you've already wounded him. You told me that yourself. You made a god bleed, Vegeta. That means he's not invincible. That means there's a path to victory, even if you can't see it yet. Vegeta turned to look at her, really look at her, and felt something loosen in his chest. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe in myself when I'm drowning in doubt. Bulma smiled, though her eyes were still worried. It's my superpower. Now come on, you need actual food, not just healing tank nutrients. And then you need sleep. Real sleep, in a real bed, with your wife beside you. I should train. If you go into that hyperbolic time chamber one more time without proper rest, I'm going to reprogram it to trap you in a time loop where you have to listen to me lecture you about proper self-care for eternity. Despite everything, Vegeta felt a small smile tug at his lips. You wouldn't. Try me. He studied her determined expression and realized she absolutely would. Fine. Food, then sleep. But tomorrow, we figure out the next step together. Not you alone. Together. Vegeta wanted to argue, to insist that this was his burden to carry. But looking at Bulma's face, seeing the love and determination there, he found he couldn't. Together, he agreed quietly. The dining room at Capsule Corporation was unusually crowded that evening. Word had spread that Vegeta was finally taking a break, and the Z fighters had gathered, not to strategize or plan, but simply to be there. Goku sat at the head of the table, working his way through a mountain of food. Piccolo stood by the window, nursing a glass of water and watching the sunset. Gohan and Vegeta were engaged in a quiet conversation with Krillin and Android 18. Trunks and Goten played a handheld game in the corner, trying to act casual but clearly worried. When Vegeta entered, followed by Bulma, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, and he resisted the urge to transform and fly away from all this attention. Don't let me interrupt your feeding frenzy, Kakarot, Vegeta said, moving to an empty chair and sitting down with more grace than he felt. Vegeta! Goku's face lit up. Hey, I was starting to worry you'd forgotten how to do anything except train. Want to spar after dinner? I've been working on this new technique where I... No. The flat refusal made the room fall silent again. Goku blinked in confusion. No? But you love sparring. It's like your favorite thing. Not tonight, Kakarot. Vegeta accepted a plate from Bulma and began eating with mechanical efficiency. Tonight I'm resting. On doctor's orders. He shot Bulma a look that was almost playful. Wow, Krillin said, exchanging glances with Android 18. Did Vegeta just make a joke? The end times are upon us, Piccolo intoned dryly. Despite himself, Vegeta felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. This was nice. Strange and uncomfortable, but nice. Being surrounded by people who cared about him, even if he'd spent years pretending their opinions didn't matter. So, Gohan said carefully, have you figured out your next move? Against Darkseid, I mean. The comfortable atmosphere evaporated immediately. Vegeta set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. I'm working on it. Maybe if we understood what you're up against better. Videl suggested. You said he embodies tyranny, that he represents the anti-life equation. But what does that actually mean? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment, organizing his thoughts. Imagine that free will is a lie. That every choice you think you make is actually just the result of cause and effect, genetics and conditioning, chemicals in your brain following predetermined patterns. The anti-life equation is the mathematical proof of this. It demonstrates that consciousness, choice, identity, all of it is just complex programming with no true agency behind it. That's depressing, Goten said, looking up from his game. That's Darkseid's entire worldview, Vegeta continued. And he doesn't just believe it, he embodies it. His power comes from the certainty that submission is inevitable, that resistance is meaningless, that eventually everyone's will breaks. That's why he's so dangerous. It's not just about strength. It's about crushing the very concept of hope. But you don't believe that, Trunks said. It wasn't a question. No. I don't. Vegeta's hands clenched into fists on the table. I can't. Because if the anti-life equation is true, if free will doesn't exist, then nothing I've done matters. Every choice I made to become better than I was, every sacrifice, every moment of growth, all of it would just be predetermined programming. And I refuse to accept that. So you're fighting him to prove free will exists? Gohan asked, his scholarly interest peaked despite the dire situation. I'm fighting him to prove that I exist, Vegeta corrected. Not as a biological machine following programming, but as a being who chooses who he is. That's what Royal Absolute represents. The absolute certainty that my choices define me, not my circumstances. Goku leaned back in his chair, unusually thoughtful. You know, when I achieved Ultra Instinct, Whis told me something. He said the technique works by letting go of thought, letting the body move on pure instinct without the mind getting in the way. But what you're describing is different. You're not letting go of thought, you're embracing it. You're making every action a conscious choice. That's exactly it, Kakarot. Vegeta looked at his rival with something approaching respect. Ultra Instinct is about achieving perfection through thoughtlessness. Royal Absolute is about achieving perfection through absolute conviction. Two different paths to the same goal. But there's a problem, isn't there? Piccolo spoke up from his position by the window. Royal Absolute gives you perfect defense through unwavering will. But you need offense too. You need to attack with the same certainty you defend. That's what I've been trying to develop, Vegeta admitted. In the hyperbolic time chamber, Trunks and I worked on evolving Royal Absolute into something more complete. But every time I think I'm close, every time I push the form further, I hit a wall. Defense comes naturally. It's easy to be certain that I won't fall. But attack requires something more. It requires the certainty that I can win, not just survive. And after facing darkseid, he trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. You doubt you can win, Bulma finished quietly. I doubt I can win alone, Vegeta corrected. And that's the problem. Because this is a fight only I can take. If I rely on you, Kakarot, if I lean on fusion or teamwork, then even if we drive darkseid away, I'll have proven his point. That individual will isn't enough. That submission to something greater, even if that something is a partnership, is inevitable. That's stupid, Android 18 said bluntly. Everyone turned to look at her. She shrugged. What? It is. You're so caught up in your pride that you're refusing help that could save everyone. How is dying alone better than living with friends? Because dying alone while standing is better than living on my knees, Vegeta shot back. You were created to be a weapon, controlled by Dr. Gero. Then you broke free, chose your own path, chose Krillin, chose to be more than your programming. Tell me honestly, if someone came along and said you could save the world, but only by going back to being Gero's obedient weapon, would you do it? Android 18 opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, her expression thoughtful. Exactly, Vegeta said. Some things are worth more than survival. Identity. Choice. The right to define yourself. That's what I'm fighting for. Then fight for it, Goku said simply. But Vegeta, here's the thing, you keep saying you have to do this alone. But choosing to accept help isn't the same as submitting. It's just being smart. Even Whis and Beerus work together sometimes. They're master and student. That's different. Is it? Or are you just making excuses because you're scared that needing help makes you weak? The words hit Vegeta like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not weak. I didn't say you were, Goku replied calmly, not backing down despite Vegeta's aggressive stance. I said you were scared. And you know what? That's okay. You're facing something that terrifies you, that terrifies all of us. But Vegeta, we're your friends. Your family. And watching you tear yourself apart trying to do everything alone, that's harder than any enemy we could face. Vegeta wanted to argue, to rage, to prove that he didn't need anyone. But looking around the table at the faces watching him, concerned, supportive, genuinely caring, he felt something crack inside. I watched my planet die, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I watched my race get exterminated, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was too weak. For years after that, I served Frieza, forced to bow before him every single day, knowing that he'd killed everyone I'd ever known. And I told myself that one day I'd be strong enough to stand alone. Strong enough that I'd never have to kneel again. He looked down at his hands. But no matter how strong I get, there's always someone stronger. Always someone who can make me feel like that boy who couldn't save his planet. And Darkseid. He's the embodiment of every tyrant who ever made me feel powerless. Fighting him alone isn't about pride. It's about proving to myself that I've actually grown. That I'm not still that scared child pretending to be a prince. The room was silent. Finally, Trunks spoke up. Dad, you're the strongest person I know. Not because of your power level, but because you chose to change. You chose to be better. That's not something a scared child could do. Your son's right, Piccolo added. Vegeta, you've spent so long trying to prove you're not weak that you've forgotten you already did prove it. You've protected this planet countless times. You've sacrificed yourself for others. You've chosen love over pride. The only person who still sees that scared boy when they look at you is you. Vegeta stood frozen, his mind racing. Was that true? Was he still fighting ghosts from his past rather than actual threats in the present? Was his entire approach to Darkseid colored by old fears rather than current reality? I need air, he said abruptly, and before anyone could respond, he was moving toward the balcony, his steps quick and purposeful. Bulma started to follow, but Goku put a hand on her arm. Let him process. He'll come around. Vegeta always does. And if he doesn't? Bulma asked, worry evident in her voice. Then we'll drag him around. But I don't think we'll have to. Vegeta's stubborn, but he's not stupid. Once he stops fighting himself, he'll figure out how to fight Darkseid. The balcony was cool and quiet, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. Vegeta stood at the railing, his hands gripping the metal hard enough to leave dents, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. They're right, part of him admitted. You're so caught up in proving yourself that you've forgotten what you're actually fighting for. But I have to prove myself, another part argued. If I accept help, then what was the point of everything? What was the point of all the training, all the sacrifice, all the evolution? The point was to become someone worth being, a third voice answered, and Vegeta recognized it as the voice of the man he'd become, not the boy he'd been. And that someone doesn't have to stand alone to prove his worth. He heard soft footsteps behind him but didn't turn around. A moment later, Trunks joined him at the railing, the two Saiyans standing side by side in comfortable silence. I remember when I came back from the future, Trunks said eventually. I told you about how the androids had killed everyone. How Gohan died protecting me. How I was alone, fighting a hopeless battle. Do you remember what you said to me? Vegeta did remember, though he tried to forget. I told you that you were weak. That you relied too much on Gohan. That you should have been strong enough to stand alone. Yeah. And at the time, I thought you were right. I trained harder, pushed myself further, determined to be strong enough that I wouldn't need anyone. Trunks looked at his father. But you know what I learned when I went back to the future and faced Zamasu? What? That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about standing for something. I wasn't strong because I trained by myself. I was strong because I was fighting for a future where people didn't have to be alone, where they could rely on each other. And that gave me power that no amount of solo training ever could. Vegeta was quiet, processing this. When did you get so wise? I learned from my father. Not the lessons he thought he was teaching, but the ones he actually demonstrated. Trunks smiled slightly. Dad, you say you need to fight Darkseid alone to prove that individual will matters. But doesn't your will to protect all of us matter too? Doesn't choosing to fight alongside people instead of for them show even greater strength of will? That's a complicated philosophical point, maybe. But here's a simple one. I don't want to lose you. Mom doesn't want to lose you. And I think deep down, you don't want to lose yourself either. So stop trying to prove something to ghosts from your past and start focusing on the future you're trying to protect. Before Vegeta could respond, his communicator beeped. He pulled it out, frowning at the unfamiliar signature. What now? The holographic display flickered to life, revealing not a face but a symbol. the Omega symbol that represented Darkseid's power. A voice echoed from the device, deep and resonant and absolutely certain, Saiyan Prince. I grow impatient waiting for your next evolution. So I offer you a choice, a demonstration of the very free will you claim to possess. Vegeta's expression hardened. What kind of choice? In 3 days I will return to your universe. But I will not come alone. I will bring with me the champions of the 47 universes I have already conquered. Warriors who once believed as you do, who once fought as you fight, who once claimed their will was unbreakable. All of them now serve me willingly, having learned the truth of the anti-life equation. The symbol pulsed, and images began to appear. Beings of incredible power, each one radiating strength that rivaled or exceeded the Z-Fighters. Vegeta recognized a few types: a Kryptonian, a Lantern, beings that look similar to Jiren from Universe 11, and dozens of others from across the multiverse. You may face them alone, proving your individual strength means something. Or you may call upon your allies, proving that even you require submission to a group to survive. Either way, I win. Either you fall alone, proving individual will is insufficient, or you fight with others, proving that submission to something greater is necessary for survival. Choose, Prince of Science. Choose and demonstrate the freedom you claim to possess. The transmission cut off, leaving Vegeta and Trunks staring at the now dark communicator. That's... Trunks started, then trailed off, not sure how to finish. Brilliant, Vegeta said bitterly. He's backed me into a philosophical corner. If I fight alone and lose, I prove individual strength isn't enough. If I fight with help and win, I prove that submission to a collective is necessary. There's no option that doesn't validate his worldview. Unless... Vegeta looked at his son. Unless what? Unless you reframe the question. He's trying to make this about alone versus together, individual versus collective. But what if it's not about that at all? What if it's about choice itself? Trunks' eyes lit up with excitement. Dad, you choosing to fight alone is a choice. You choosing to fight with others is also a choice. The power isn't in which option you pick, it's in the fact that you're the one picking. That's what free will means. Not that you have to do everything alone, but that you get to decide how you do things. Vegeta stared at his son, his mind working through the implications. Trunks was right. Darkseid had tried to present a false dichotomy, making it seem like any choice Vegeta made would prove his philosophy. But the real victory wasn't in choosing alone or together. It was in making the choice itself, freely and without coercion. When did you get so much smarter than me? Vegeta asked, a note of pride in his voice that he didn't try to hide. I've always been this smart. You just usually don't listen. Despite everything, despite the weight of the impending battle and the pressure of Darkseid's challenge, Vegeta laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but genuine. Alright. You've made your point, so help me figure this out. If the power is in the choice itself, not the outcome, then what's my move? Honestly? I think you should ask everyone. Not tell them what you've decided, but actually ask what they think. Let them be part of the choice. Because here's the thing, Dad, Darkseid is trying to make this about you proving something. But maybe it's not about you at all. Maybe it's about all of us proving that we choose to stand together, not because we have to, but because we want to. Vegeta processed this, turning the idea over in his mind from every angle. It went against every instinct he'd developed over decades of fighting alone, of proving himself, of refusing to show weakness by admitting he needed help. But those instincts had been forged in servitude to Frisia, in the ashes of a dead planet, in the desperate scramble to define himself as more than a slave. This was different. These people weren't his masters. They were his equals. His friends. His family. Asking for their help wasn't submission, it was trust. And trust was itself an act of will, a choice to believe in others. Alright, he said finally. Let's go back inside. And this time, I'll actually listen. The dining room was still full when Vegeta and Trunks returned. Conversation stopped as everyone turned to face them, sensing that something had changed in the Saiyan Prince's demeanor. Darkseid just made contact, Vegeta announced without preamble. He's given me a choice. In 3 days, he'll return with an army of champions from the universes he's conquered. I can face them alone, or I can fight alongside all of you. He's framing it as a trap, Either choice supposedly proves his philosophy about submission and the weakness of individual will. That's messed up, Goten said. So what are you going to do? Vegeta looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. I'm going to do something I should have done from the start. I'm going to ask. Not tell, not demand, but ask. If I face this army alone, I'll likely fall. If I fight with all of you, we might have a chance. But more than that, fighting together would be my choice, not because I'm too weak to stand alone, but because I choose to stand with people I trust. So here's my question. Will you fight beside me? The room was silent for a moment. Then Goku stood up, his expression serious but his eyes bright with excitement. Of course, Vegeta. We're rivals, but we're also friends. I've got your back. The question was rhetorical, Kakarot, Vegeta said, but there was no heat in his words. I knew you'd say yes. You're too much of a fight-happy idiot to say no. Gee, thanks, Goku said, grinning. Piccolo spoke next. I'll fight. Not because you asked, but because Earth is worth protecting. And because watching you finally ask for help is worth the price of admission alone. I'm in, Gohan said, standing as well. We've faced impossible odds before. This is no different. One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Krillin, despite his obvious nervousness. Android 18, with her characteristic bluntness. Videl, determined to prove herself. Even Goten and young Trunks, though Vegeta immediately vetoed their participation. Absolutely not. You two are staying here where it's safe. But Dad, Trunks started to protest. No buts. This isn't a training exercise. This is a battle against beings who have conquered universes. You're strong, but you're not ready for this. Vegeta's tone left no room for argument. Besides, someone needs to protect your mother and the rest of the civilians if things go wrong. Trunks looked like he wanted to argue further, but a look from Bulma made him subside. Fine. But you'd better come back. That's the plan. Vegeta turned to address the group as a whole. 3 days. That gives us time to prepare, to coordinate, to figure out our strategy. And before anyone suggests it, no, we're not using fusion. Not yet anyway. Fusion is a last resort if everything else fails. The goal here is to show that we choose to fight together, not that we have to become one being to survive. Agreed, Goku said. So what's the plan? The plan is to not have a plan beyond the basics, Vegeta said, and when everyone looked at him in confusion, he elaborated. Darkseid wants predictability. He wants to demonstrate that all choices follow predetermined patterns. So we're going to be unpredictable. We coordinate enough to not get in each other's way, but beyond that, everyone fights their own battle their own way. Make choices moment to moment. Be chaotic. Be creative. Show him that free will doesn't mean individual isolation. It means choosing how to work together. Piccolo nodded slowly. That's actually brilliant. If we're constantly making choices he can't predict, choices that don't follow any pattern he can analyze, we demonstrate that the anti-life equation can't account for genuine free will. Exactly. Vegeta allowed himself a small smile. He's going to bring his army of broken champions, beings who've submitted to his will, but we're going to show him what it looks like when warriors choose to stand together. Not because they have to, but because they want to. There's just one problem, Android 18 pointed out. These champions he's bringing, they've conquered entire universes. Even working together, we might be outmatched. Then we'll get stronger, Goku said simply. We've got 3 days. That's enough time for some serious training. Hey Vegeta, want to finally try that sparring match? Vegeta considered. His body was healed, his mind clearer than it had been in days. And fighting Kakarot always pushed him to evolve in ways solo training couldn't. Fine. But no holding back. I need to be pushed to my absolute limit. Same here, Goku agreed, his expression becoming serious. Because if we're doing this, if we're really standing against this darkseid guy together, then we both need to be at our best. Then let's not waste time. Vegeta headed toward the door. Everyone, train however you think best. Work on teamwork exercises if you want, or solo if that's your style. Just be ready, because in 3 days we're either going to prove that free will and choice matter, or we're going to die trying. Inspiring speech, Piccolo said dryly. I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to win. Vegeta paused at the doorway, looking back at the assembled warriors. But thank you, all of you, for choosing to stand with me. I won't forget it. He left before anyone could respond to what was, for Vegeta, an incredibly emotional statement. Goku hurried after him, and soon the two Saiyans were lifting into the night sky, heading toward an uninhabited area where they could train without worrying about collateral damage. Back in the dining room, Bulma let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Did that really just happen? Did Vegeta actually ask for help and thank people? Character development, Krillin said, looking almost as shocked as Bulma. Actual, genuine character development from Vegeta. I never thought I'd see the day. He's finally figuring out what the rest of us learned a long time ago, Piccolo said, moving toward the door. That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about choosing who to stand with. Now if you'll excuse me, I have my own training to do. 3 days isn't much time. As the Z fighters dispersed to prepare in their own ways, Bulma remained in the dining room with her son, both of them looking out the window toward where they could see distant flashes of light. Vegeta and Goku already deep in their training battle. He's going to be okay, right, Mom? Trunks asked quietly. Your father? He's faced impossible odds before and come out on top. This won't be any different. But even as she said it, Bulma felt the worry gnawing at her. This time felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemy more absolute, the philosophical weight heavier than any physical threat. I wish I could help, Trunks said, his hands clenching into fists. I hate sitting on the sidelines. I know, sweetie. But your father's right. You're not ready for this level of threat. None of us are, really. We're just going to do our best and hope it's enough. She pulled her son into a hug. But having you safe will let your father fight without worry. That's how you can help. They stood together, watching the light show in the distance, each lost in their own thoughts about what the next 3 days would bring, and what would happen when Darkseid returned with his army of broken champions. 3 days later, the wasteland where Vegeta and Darkseid had first fought was now the staging ground for something far larger. The Z fighters stood in a loose formation, not rigid or military, but positioned so they could support each other while maintaining individual mobility. Vegeta stood at the front, his arms crossed, his expression calm despite the tension thrumming through his body. Royal Absolute flickered around him, but he'd refined it further over the past 3 days. The purple and black energy was now shot through with threads of gold and blue, incorporating elements of Super Saiyan Blue's divine ki without losing the core of what made Royal Absolute work. It was a hybrid form, mixing perfect ki control with unshakable will. Behind him, Goku stood in his base form, but his aura practically vibrated with contained power. He'd been practicing switching between transformations instantaneously, ready to adapt to whatever threat presented itself. Piccolo had removed his weighted clothing and stood in ready stance, his cape billowing in the wind. Gohan had achieved his ultimate form, his hair white, his power awakened. Android 18 cracked her knuckles, her expression bored but her eyes sharp. Krillin checked his equipment one last time, determined not to be deadweight despite the massive power gap. Here they come, Piccolo said, his enhanced hearing picking up the distortion in space-time before the others. Reality tore open, larger than before, and through it came an army. Beings of every shape and size, each one radiating power that would have been enough to threaten a universe on their own. They moved in perfect unison, their eyes blank, their expressions empty. Champions broken and remade in Darkseid's image, and at their head, stepping through last, came Darkseid himself. So, the tyrant's voice boomed across the wasteland. You've made your choice, Prince of Saiyans. You stand with allies. Does this mean you've accepted that individual strength is insufficient? It means I've accepted that I get to choose how I fight, Vegeta called back, his voice strong and clear. These warriors stand with me not because I'm too weak to stand alone, but because I choose to trust them. Because fighting together is itself an act of free will, something your broken champions can't understand anymore. Darkseid regarded him for a long moment. Interesting rationalization. We shall see if it holds when tested. Champions, attack! Show these warriors what happens to those who resist the inevitable. The army surged forward, and the Z fighters moved to meet them. Stay sharp, Vegeta ordered. Don't try to match them one-on-one, work together, but make choices moment to moment. Be unpredictable. Show them what free warriors look like, and then there was no more time for words. Only battle. Only the clash of those who chose to stand against those who'd been broken into servitude. The war for free will had truly begun, and Vegeta, for the first time in his life, wasn't fighting it alone.